Hi everybody, and welcome to the world of IEM overload. What I mean by that is there are so many IEMs coming out on the market consistently. There's a new model announced every other day. And so the only way I can kind of keep up with the number that are being sent to me is by approaching my reviews in a slightly different way, but hopefully one that's going to be interesting and different for you as well. What I've got for you today and what's graphed here on screen are all the different IEMs I'm going to be looking at. We're going to step through them one by one. They're all around about the $100 mark, some a little bit below, some a little bit above. And so we're going to work through and have a listen to all of them. I've got a couple of selected comparisons I might throw in there, but mostly I'm just going to be talking about them in isolation in terms of how they sound just straight up plugged into a high quality device and taking a listen. Along the way, I'll also talk to you a little bit more about my Squiglink site, which is now set up, and we'll use that for comparisons throughout this video. The final couple of things to mention before we dive in with our first IEM is that all of my listening is being done with my phone as a source. It's a Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra for those that care. And that's connected up via USB into the Death and Ray Listening M1, which has just arrived. It's a beautiful little compact device with USB DAC, auxiliary input as well. It's got balanced and single input output, so I can use it for any sort of connection type I've got on these IEMs, and it's a beautiful sounding unit. So I haven't done a full review of that one. It's literally just arrived, but that will be coming up for review. Make sure you subscribe if you want to see that one. But that's the source chain we're running. And the final thing to mention is that I've also got a new microphone I'm playing with here today for an upcoming trip that I'm going to be doing with a lot of content and interviews, hopefully as well. So I've bought myself this Hollyland Lark Max microphone system. I'm going to intersperse some of the audio from that as we go through. I'd love your feedback on it. If you like it, don't like it, if it needs some work, etc., let me know in the comments down below. But for now, let's jump in and talk about the IEMs that we're looking at today. I'm going to introduce them quickly. What we've got first up, and these are in no particular order, they're just the order that they were in my list of notes. We've got the Kiwi Forteza. That's a $59 IEM. I've actually recently mentioned it in my review of the Auraveti OD100. It was a comparison point there. We've also got the Moondrop Aria 2. I really liked the previous version, Aria Snow, so I'm interested to see how this one goes. It's a little bit quirky in a few ways. It's got the same tuning mechanism. I don't know if it's actually talked about here, but the same tuning mechanism that was used on the Starfield, but it doesn't come with any of the bits and pieces to actually tune it, so it's a little bit of a strange one. We'll talk about that when we get there. We've got the EA500, which is another one from Simgot, again with their tuning system built in. We've got the Kinera Celest Phoenix Call, courtesy of Elise Audio. And then finally, I should put these in the right order, finally we've then got the Kiwi Crinacle Singolo, which I haven't listened to at all yet. All the others I've tried at least briefly. I haven't tried this Singolo at all yet. So we're going to start at the left-hand end. You can't see the top bar, but I've got them lined up in my tabs on my browser. We're going to start at the left-hand end, work our way through, and I'll sort of talk about them as we go, I should say, and share with you which one I think is the best each time, and then compare, sort of like a King of the Hill idea, compare the next one up to the one that's currently winning from those that have come before it. So you'll see what I mean as we get into this. It'll all make a lot of sense. So let's kick things off with the Kiwi Forteza. As you can see here, if I hold these up to the camera, these are a beautiful design. They've got a lovely reflective faceplate that sort of changes colors depending on the angle of the light. They're an acrylic shell. They've got a decent, just twisted black cable. There's nothing special about it, but it's fine. The set I've got here is a 3.5mm termination. I'm not sure if they come with others. The box itself is just a nice compact one. I don't really do unboxing, but given that I'm not going to be doing B-roll, I did want to give you a chance to see anything unique about these. Let's get the box out. So in the box, we've just got a small compact zip pouch carry case with some tips in there. The tips are nothing special, they're fine. Again, for the price you're paying for $59, I don't really expect much more than that. So we'll pop these in here. There's the lid. And take a listen. By the way, for all listening here, I'm probably going to, and I'll let you know if I change, I'm probably going to use the spring tips from Moondrop. I used to think I didn't like these, and then recently when I was doing some measurements and some listening for the Auraveti review, I found myself really enjoying them. So I don't know if my ears have changed or what's going on, but the spring tips are my current favorites. We'll see if that lasts throughout this video. We'll see what happens. So I'm going to have a quick listen now to the Fortezas and just share my thoughts. I have listened to these quite a bit for the OD100 review, but I'm just going to refresh my memory and then talk to you a bit about what I'm hearing. I was just listening to You and Me by James TW. it's not a track I know well. I'm actually listening to what I call my discovery playlist, where I just have albums that I want to check out but I haven't yet. So I've just shuffled that and we'll see what we get as we go. But the album, or the recording of You and Me, seems to be okay. I deliberately try to test with a range of tracks and with not always the best possible recordings, unless I'm looking to really understand the technical capabilities of a particular IEM. But having spent time with this one before, it was more just about remembering what its tonality is. And I think for me, and you can sort of see on screen here in the graph, for me it's a little bit on the V-shaped side and a little bit too bright. It brings a wonderful sense of articulation to the sound. So this track that I was just listening to has a lot of acoustic guitar work, and the acoustic guitar's got a really crisp sound to it. But unfortunately, if we look at the graph here, this big gulf in the mid-range that then leads up into the treble, for me, that's sort of a difference between a mid-range band, for instance, and a treble band, can start to make things quite fatiguing, because I want to turn it up enough to get that weight and presence that should be in the mids, but by the time I do that, there's a big difference into the treble energy that's coming out. And even accounting for the fact that we should have this lift here for the HRTF, which is the way our ears expect to perceive sound, you need a bit more energy here. The actual output that we're getting, to me, is a little bit too much. If I move over for just a moment and look at so this is the 10 dB curve, which is, as far as I understand it, I'm still learning a bit about the 5128 compensation or target curves. My understanding is that a flat line here is a truly neutral sound experience or perception. And so you can see here that from a truly neutral point of view, we've got elevated bass, we've got pulled away mid-range, and then we have got some elevation around 2 kilohertz, which is often a troublesome frequency for me. I don't know how it is for you. And then again, a little bit after 4K, and a big spike up at about, it's just over 9K. So that's definitely reflective of what I'm hearing here. These are a little bit crispy, a little bit bright. They do have beautiful, deep, solid bass, but there's just a bit of a gulf in between. And if we then just go back to my personal target curve, and I can flatten that out here as well. And by the way, there's a link for the access to this database in the descriptions down below. So you can go through and you can check this out for yourself, play with all my graphs, play with the target curves. There's target curves from all different people here if you want to see theirs. I'm still working on mine. This is very early days, but it's pretty close to my personal preference for an IEM. And if I flatten that out so we can sort of see where the peaks and troughs really lie, you can see there that I like a little bit more in that sort of upper bass range. I definitely like more through the mid-range and not quite so much in the top end. So these IEMs, they're a nice technical IEM, that being the Kiwi is Forteza. They're just a little bit crispy in the top end, beautiful bass, generally technically solid, but a little bit V-shaped for my personal taste in things. Staging on them, I'd say, is okay. It's not special. It's fairly left-right with a little bit of depth. I'm just going to do a tiny bit more listening and just come back to you with some details on staging, imaging, etc. So listening again now, what I was listening to then was Whole Wide World by the Rolling Stones, and the sound's really actually tonally not great for me from the Fortezas. Now I should point out here, and I've covered this in a different video, we all hear differently. I know for a fact that I have sensitivities around this sort of 2 kilohertz to 4 kilohertz range, so in this band here, and that's going to influence what I'm hearing. So do take that into account. You might hear the Fortezas and go, these are wonderful for me, and therefore if you're anything like me, these are going to be too bright for you. And what it means is that listening to a track like Whole Wide World from the Rolling Stones, the snare is way overemphasized and it sounds quite plasticky. It doesn't sound like it's natural in any way, shape or form. And then Mick Jagger's vocals as well are very enhanced in the upper registers. It gets quite nasal, quite forward with the mouth sounds, so consonants like s and t are getting quite forward. It's not a particularly enjoyable sound. Some of this is going to be source dependent. As I said before, I don't yet really know the listing M1 from Death and Ray. Knowing the general tuning that comes out of Death and Ray products, it's not going to be a bright clinical product, but it might not be quite as forgiving as maybe the Mojo 2 was, which was what I listened to the Fortezas on the first time. So take all that into account, but what I'm hearing matches the graph. So this is not to say that the listing M1 is throwing anything off here. it's definitely showing me what I'm seeing on the graph, and it's not a sound that I particularly enjoy. And some tracks, you know, like a Rolling Stones track here, are going to make that more obvious and make it worse. So not off to a great start. The Forteza, I'm not really loving. It's not bad, it's technically solid. The stage is mostly left-right, not a huge amount of depth to it, which is really common at this sort of price point. They're kind of what I would expect for a $59 IEM, but I also think you can do better. To the point that I would probably pick up a set of blonde BLO3s, BLO1s, something like that before I would go for these. In fact, even thinking about it, something like a blonde A8 Prometheus is a bit more expensive, admittedly. Rolls off more in the bass, but it's got a slightly smoother top end, which helps to balance that out. I'd probably go for something like the Prometheus over the Forteza, personally. That's just me. So let's have a look at the next model we've got here. And that's going to be the Moondrop Aria 2. So this has been sent to me. I should say, by the way, the Fortezas were courtesy of channel sponsor Linsol, so thank you to them for sending them out. In terms of specifications, in case you want to know that, these use, let's have a look for the specs. These are using 2 dynamic drivers and a balanced armature. They're a 103 decibel per milliwatt sensitivity and 32 ohms, so pretty easy to drive, nothing fancy or special there. 2-pin connector, the cable, like I said, is okay. So that's the gist of them, $59. If we then look at the Moondrop Aria 2, which was kindly sent out by Apos, so these are jumping up to a $90 IEM, and I haven't ordered these in any sort of pricing range or anything. This is literally as they went into my notes, which means probably as they arrived in my office. So the Aria 2 is a bit of a jump up. We're jumping up, what, $31 odd here, and they're therefore expected to be a better IEM. In terms of the Aria specs, and we'll have a look at them in a second, but just scrolling down for the specs, I don't tend to get too caught up in the product highlights type stuff. Everybody's got their reasons for why their IEM's better. We've got a sensitivity of 122 decibels, but that's per volt. I don't know off the top of my head what that calculates to. It's going to be around about mid to high 100, so 110, 108, somewhere around there, I'm guessing. Again, you know, normal for an IEM. 33 ohms, so that's very normal as well. And they are using, not told to us here, it's a single dynamic driver again, I think. Yeah, single dynamic driver with a vent is what it appears. And apparently new venting, which is, let me get them out. So this is the box they come in. Nothing special there so far. You get a nice, tasteful little carry case. Nothing special. We've seen this sort of thing before. Lovely cable on these. Really, really nice cable. I haven't opened the set of tips from them, so I'm not sure exactly what tips you get with them. I'm guessing you'll get some decent tips, given that Moondrop make things like the spring tips. So the IEMs themselves look like this. They're very heavy for an IEM of this price point, not in a bad way, but they're a metal shell, they feel really solid. You've got these nice tuning, or not tuning nozzles, you've got these nice removable nozzles. There is no tuning included with these. So what I was talking about before is there's a little vent, you can see at the bottom of the nozzle there. That little vent is the same as what was used on the Starfield. With the Starfield, you got little plugs, and it was a horrible tuning system in my opinion, because they were way too fiddly. But you got little plugs you could stick into those little slots there and change the airflow on the driver and therefore affect the tuning. That's not the case here. I can't find anything in the box anywhere that suggests you're able to tune these. They're just a ready to go, you know, plug and play type IEM. The other thing with this one is it does have a swappable plug system. So what you get with this one is a 4.4mm, which is I left in there, and a 3.5mm as well. So I'm going to test with the 3.5 because that's just what I've been using with the Fortezas, so it's a nice direct comparison. So let's have a listen now. Same exact setup, listening M1, driven by my phone, or fed by my phone. I tried a few tracks then, and I stopped with Rango by Wolfpack. And what I heard as I went through a few tracks, including the Rolling Stones track from earlier that I tried on the Aria 2, the Forteza, the Aria 2 is definitely a slightly more balanced tuning than the Forteza, but it's still not great for me. It's just a little bit bright still. And when I'm talking about this, my constant reference point is as I'm listening to an IEM, or any headphone for that matter, any device for that matter, what I'm doing is I'm imagining myself in a venue listening to whatever that music is. And I'm trying to work out if it sounds right in terms of, does it sound like I'm standing in a venue, in a good, well set up venue, listening to a band playing, or does it sound like somehow an adjusted version of that? And the Aria 2 sounds like an adjusted version of that. It leans too much into brightness for me. It makes the sound a little bit thin, and it's, again, just a little bit artificial. It's an easier listen than the Kiwi is Forteza, for sure. It, as you can see on the graph here, it's pulling back on some of the treble, which I think is very helpful. But at the same time, and by the way, some of these peaks here, I didn't actually mention this before, some of this is actually the coupler resonance. The 711 clone couplers have a bit of a resonance peak up in this top end, so we actually should take that with a grain of salt. Based on my measurement experience with it, if there is this much of a peak, there is some level of peak from the IEM, but it's not going to be as dramatic as it looks on the graph. Putting that aside for a moment, there is still, for me, a slightly enhanced treble. If we go back and have a look, let me just pin that, and we're going to have a look at the 5128 as well. So you can see, actually I'm going to hide mine, you can see here that technically the Aria 2 has actually got pretty linear bass compared to this neutral target, but it also then jumps up again quite significantly at around about this 2 kilohertz mark. So that's why it's still sounding somewhat similar to the Forteza. I think it's done a little bit better. I think it's better balanced, but it's still a bit bright in my opinion. For those of you that love IEMs, let's have a look at the Aria Snow, which I will have a listen to in comparison in a second. For those of you that know the Aria Snow, that's really interesting because I really like the Aria Snow, and I'm not so much enjoying what I'm hearing from the Aria 2. So I think the next step is, let's get the Aria Snow out. Let's hide the, where is it? Let's hide the Forteza because that's a no-go for me. And let's now have a listen to the Snow and see just how close these actually sound, because sometimes there's more to the sound than what you see in a frequency graph. Sometimes the smoothness or the sort of edginess of a sound can alter how we perceive it, and it's possible that's what's going on here. So I'm going to try the Snow and then we'll keep talking. I've just gone back and forth a bunch here, and I think what we're seeing on screen is actually accurate. There's a few things going on that I'm sort of trying to process in my head here. I went back and listened to the same Wolfpack track. I also went and listened to Tired of Hanging Around by the Zootons, and across a range of tracks, the Aria 2 and the Aria Snow are actually very, very similar. If anything, I actually think the Aria 2 is a little bit more refined sounding. It's got a little tiny bit more warmth in the bass, which is great as well. And so I'm just checking because I just had my camera crash before, which is why if the footage of me has disappeared when I'm speaking, it's because I'm having issues with the camera crashing. I'm using Camtasia to record this, and I don't normally get into reviews of software, but my short review on Camtasia 2023, don't buy it, don't use it. If you can use anything else, do it. It's horrible. Anyway, back to the IEMs. The Aria 2 is a bit more refined sounding. I think it's delivering the music a bit better from a refinement point of view. There's probably a couple of little peaks in the treble that I don't necessarily need for my ears, but I do think the quality of that treble is better. So essentially what I'm hearing is they've taken the Aria Snow, which was very good for the price, and just made it better in pretty much every way. However, it doesn't change the fact that for me, it is still an IEM that's not as natural as I'd like. It leans a little bit too much into the treble, into the sibilant sounds. So I'm not saying it's a sibilant IEM as such, but because it's got emphasis there when the vocals have those sibilant sounds, or when you've got snares and other sounds that operate in this kind of same bandwidth up here, I personally find them just a little bit hot. They're more enjoyable for sure than the Forteza for me, but they're still not a complete winner. So we're going to park that one there. If you were looking at the Aria Snow, the Aria 2 is the same but better in my opinion. But for now, let's have a look at the next IEM. This is coming from Linsol again, so thank you to Linsol. Actually, no, I think this came direct from Simgot. The EA500 here is a $79 IEM, so it's kind of sitting in between these last two. It uses a tunable system. Interestingly, here it's saying it's got 2 target curves, and that's curious because you get 3 different nozzles. We'll talk about that more in a second. If I take it out of the box, one thing I will say about the Simgot IEMs is they are beautifully made. The Aria 2 is lovely as well. I shouldn't say that in the sense that I'm not saying this is better than the Aria 2. The Aria 2 is exceptional and a big step up from the Aria Snow. So again, you're going to get yourself a little carry case. not even branded on this one. They've spared every expense. You then get another nice cable. It doesn't feel quite as good as the Aria 2 cable, but it's also not quite as thick, and that's going to be nice in terms of probably it's going to drape a little bit better. So we've got here the EA500. This is in the, has it got two colorways? No, it doesn't seem to. So this is it there. There is another version, which is the, I'm just making sure I have got the LM version. Aha. Let me go to the LM version for you. I thought it looked a different color. So this is the LM version, which is a lithium magnesium. I think the shell is lithium magnesium. Let's see. No, it's the diaphragm. So it's a lithium magnesium dome diaphragm. Again, you know, they've all got their reasons for them to be better than anything else, but in the end, they're also all just another IEM. So again, it's saying it's got a dual target frequency response, and yet I've got three nozzles here, three sets of nozzles. It came with a set that were gold, which is currently on here, and then two sets of silver ones, one with a red O-ring, one with a black O-ring. I'm just trying to see what that might be about. Maybe you just get a spare. Yes, it's listed here as well. Gold copper nozzle and red silicon ring, silver steel nozzle, red silicon ring, silver steel nozzle, black silicon ring. But if we have a look at the graphs, let's keep the Aria 2 on screen because it's going to be our go-to reference. I'm going to get rid of the Aria Snow now, irrelevant now. And let's add in the Simgot with the gold nozzle, which I've got fitted. So that's it there. Interestingly though, actually what I'm going to do is let me also show you straight away. The red nozzle, which is the silver nozzle with the red O-ring, you can see it graphs really close to the copper gold, like indistinguishable based on the fact that there's going to be a margin for error by the time I remove the IEM from the coupler, change the nozzle, put the IEM back in. Slight variations in the depth and insertion of the IEM is going to change that. I'm not even going to bother listening to the silver nozzle with the red O-ring because it seems that, and I don't know why I've got it in the packet for this reason, but it seems that that's exactly the same as the gold one. Maybe it's just for aesthetics if people want silver, who knows. However, if we then go to the silver nozzle with the black O-ring, you can see here, I'm just going to hide the Aria 2 for a second, you can see here that that is a different tuning. I can already probably tell from this that I'm not going to enjoy the silver nozzle with the black O-ring so much because it is a little bit brighter. You can see the bass drops away a little bit and it provides more emphasis over and above. This is my preference curve that I've flattened here. So my preference curve is a bit darker, a bit smoother than most of the neutral target curves. So that says to me that the silver and black nozzle is not going to be my cup of tea. The gold, we'll wait and see. So let's have a listen and we'll talk more about it. By the way, we've got a 3.5mm termination on this one, which makes things nice and easy. We've got everything 3.5mm so far. Some people have had issues in the past that I was using the Final Audio E-type tips, which I also really like. The Final Audio E-types have a smaller bore, the actual hole in the tip smaller, and that can reduce some of the treble energy that comes through. So this is more of an open direct connection to the drivers by using these spring tips because they're quite an open bore design, and therefore you can tune a little bit by going to a more narrow bore tip. You can also tune though by changing insertion depth and stuff. So there's so many variables, and that's why IEM reviews have only moderate relevance, because unless you know you've got similar sensitivities and preferences to the person reviewing it, it's very hard to know what to take from their review because so much of it comes down to the internal ear anatomy and insertion depth and tip choice. But let's have a listen to these, and hopefully what I'm sharing with you is of some help, at least in sharing the differences between the IEMs. I finished up there listening to Burning Love by Jamie Faulkner, who's an Aussie blues guitarist, a really cool artist if you're into blues and sort of rock blues type sounds. These are lovely. The EA500 is really, really nice. Interestingly enough, whilst it has got a little bit more brightness in some parts of its measurements compared to the Aria 2, and you can see that on screen now, it's balancing it all better somehow. And this is what I said before, that the measurements don't always tell us the full story because the quality of the delivery can change it. Whether it's being delivered by a dynamic driver or a combination of dynamics and balanced armatures, the qualities of, I think in this case we've actually got two single dynamic driver IEMs we're talking about in the Aria 2 and the EA500. Even the way those drivers are designed can change the sound, and I think that's going on here. The other thing to keep in mind though is that the Simgot EA500 does have more of the bass extension, and therefore that's going to give a bit more weight under the sound. Having said all that, it's still not perfect. I like the fact that it's a little bit less energetic up around this 2K range. You can definitely hear that. For me, it's a little bit less forceful, a little bit less fatiguing, but it still is overemphasizing, in my opinion at least, these upper registers. And the reason I'm saying that is that, again, what I said before, listening to this track, I've seen Jamie Faulkner live. I know what his voice sounds like. It sounds, as I'm listening to the EA500s, like I've gone to a club, a pub, a venue, whatever it might be, and I'm listening to somebody play through a PA system that's been poorly set up. Like the mixing engineer that's set up the microphones and is trying to manage the sound of the room is pushing too much emphasis into the treble, sucking too much out of the bass. It takes some of the weight and the presence away from Jamie Faulkner's vocals, and it's not bad, but I still think, and this is kind of a bit of a symptom of all the tunings being quite similar at the moment, there's too much emphasis going into the treble, the upper mid-range, and I think it's to make these IEMs all sound detailed and clarity focused. But if you're thinking about it from a tonality point of view, I personally feel like it throws the tonality off. Maybe that's just me. Let me know in the comments your thoughts if you've tried the Aria 2, the Forteza, or the EA500. Let me know in the comments what you think, because it's not sounding natural to my ears, and that's now with the Mojo 2 and also the Listening M1, so two really quality devices. It's just not quite hitting the mark for me in terms of tonality. But having said that, the EA500 is the strongest of the lot so far. Really nice as far as these go. It's a really nice tonality. The transitions from one frequency to the next are nice and smooth, so there's not any kind of jarring moments of too much emphasis here or there. The thing that really stands out to me though is they've got a wonderful sense of articulation, the crispness of the leading edges of notes, not in terms of the attack, but in terms of when there are sounds. One of the tracks I listened to was, what was the name of it? Can I see it here? And Data, and it's by Chihiro Yamanaka. There's an organ being played in that, like a Hammond organ or something similar, and you can almost hear the specific moment that the electronics in the organ kick in and make each sound. It's really hard to explain, but there's just a crispness and an articulation to the leading edges of each sound that bring a sense of energy and life to the music. And there's a few IEMs on the planet that do this that I really enjoy. The Hyphaman's Fanar does this with the bass. The T-Audio Elixir does this across the board. I don't know what specifically it is that causes this phenomena, if you like, but it makes for a really engaging listen to me, and these definitely have it. So very articulate, very energetic without being aggressive or in your face. As I said, the tonality is just not quite where I'd like it to be, but they're really, really good, and so far the EA500 is the winner for me. For the sake of time, I'm actually not going to bother taking out the, no, I should. Let me quickly change the tips on them to the, which ones did I say was actually worthwhile checking, was the silver with the black. And we will turn off the Aria 2 graph now, because in my mind there's no point talking Aria 2 when it costs more money, and the Simgots, in my opinion, are better. For the skeptics out there, keep in mind that the models so far that I've said I don't like so much were both provided by channel sponsors and or channel sponsor in the case of Linsol, and an affiliate of the channel where I do get money if you buy through Appos using my links. Thank you to those of you that do that, by the way. But once again, it's the EA500, which is not sponsored in any way. There's no affiliates there. That's the one that I'm actually preferring. So as is always the case, who sends me the gear, what affiliates I get, has nothing to do with whether or not I like it or not. So let's get the black nozzles on here. So just to show you them here, hopefully you can see this okay. It's just a little silver nozzle, and there's a black, you probably can't even see that on the camera, there's a little black O-ring at the bottom of them. As I said, I still have no idea why they give you 3 nozzles and there's only 2 target tunings. It's quite strange. I do like the fact that this is a nice, quick, easy system, which is really good. And just having a look inside the nozzle there, there's a piece of foam inside the, that might be why they give you a 3rd nozzle. There's a piece of foam inside both nozzles, so it's obviously just different densities of foam, how open the the bubbles, if you like, in the foam are, can really change the sound. The third set of nozzles is probably so you can actually play around yourself. You can tweak it with your own foam inserts, you can cut the foam apart, etc., is my guess. As far as brighter tunings go, I think that's actually really nice. It's not a sound that I would choose to listen to. I think it throws the tonality too far off. It pushes us way too far into that bright, kind of thin, sterile sound. Where I think the saving grace is for the EA500s across the board, though, is, and looking at their graph, I think because they don't kick up as high at 2 kilohertz, they're starting to rise, but it's really not a boost until you're getting closer to 3 kilohertz, and I think that saves them. It seems to be the 2 kilohertz, at least for me and my ears. That's where the real problem seems to lie. I'm a fan of the EA500. I should change them back to the gold nozzle though, because we're going to keep these carrying on as our current champions and see what the next option has to bring. So next up, and this is thanks to the team over at Elise Audio, who I've never worked with before, so thank you to them for sending out the Kinera Celest Phoenix Call. So the Phoenix Call is a bit of a different IEM in this batch in the sense that it comes in an acrylic shell. It's a little bit more expensive. It's not $194 for those of you using US dollars. That's an Australian dollar amount. Let me change that for you in a second, but while I wait for that, so we can see there it's using a single dynamic driver, it's using 2 balanced armatures and 2 microplanar drivers. And often, so the microplanars are actually for the highs. I've seen this done a few times now, and it's quite an interesting approach. If we just change the pricing, there we go, that's better. So $125 US dollars. So it's a fair jump up on the models we've been looking at so far. But I did want to get it in here nice and early so you could hear about it, and also because I think it's still sort of vaguely around that $100 mark. So we're spanning a fair range. I get that. We're going from $59 US dollars in the case of the Forteza. We're going up now to 125, so we're kind of doubling that. It is a big jump, but I thought it was worthwhile. As in worthwhile to include this IEM in this roundup. Let's have a look at the Celest. Now, first things first, that's what you get in the box. It's, in my opinion, extreme. I've said this before, I would much rather that brands put either the cost back into making it cheaper or making it even better with some other accessories. I'm not a fan of all this marketing, and I don't know if that's a bookmark by the look of it. It's beautiful, it looks lovely, but it's not something I personally value. Again, let me know in the comments what your thoughts are. I would prefer that we had our products come out cheaper or better for the same money, rather than all the extra bits and pieces. Once again, nice cable. I think all of these so far have had pretty solid cables, and definitely an upgrade over some of the older cables, like the Aria Snow. The cable was nowhere near as good as the Aria 2. I think the Forteza was probably the most average cable, and it was still solid, so we're going well in terms of cable quality. As I said before, and as you can see on screen, the Phoenix Call is an acrylic shell IEM. I've got the dark coloured ones. Let's see if we can show it on the screen. That's what I've got here, which is, they're actually quite dark in real life, so you can barely see the colours in this light. In fact, mine aren't even vaguely red or blue. They also don't have the little things on them, the little doves or birds or whatever they are. So I'm not entirely sure what's going on here. As far as I can tell, these are the same IEMs. Celest. It says Phoenix Call on the box. Definitely the Phoenix Call. Hopefully these are the correct ones. If the team from Elise Audio are seeing this, let me know in the comments. Hopefully I've got the right product here. Let me see if I've got. Is it the Dark Phoenix? If it's the Dark Phoenix I've got here, then my first bit of feedback in terms of reviewing is that it's really poorly labelled. And this is not Elise Audio's fault. This is the fact that it hasn't been clarified in the packaging. It doesn't say anywhere on the box that what I've got here is the Dark Phoenix, but this is definitely what I've got. Definitely what I've got. Okay, so it's the Dark Phoenix I'm reviewing here. It's $147 US dollars, so this is actually now pushing outside the realm of what I wanted to be reviewing in this review, but we're here, so let's do it. Let's have a listen and then I'll talk about it. So on my on my squig link, these are currently called, let me get rid of that one. These are currently called the Kinera Celest Phoenix Call, which we've just discovered are not the Kinera Celest Phoenix Call. They're actually the Dark Phoenix, which is an upgraded version of the Phoenix Call as far as I can tell. Now looking at the graph, this is going to be really interesting. If you have been paying attention as we talk here, your exam's coming up soon, these have a peak at about 1.5K. So, and let me just unflatten that for a minute, take my target out of being flat. So these have got a really deep V-shaped tuning to them based on the measurements I've got here. And these are all with a 711 coupler clone, by the way, because I know a lot of people had real issues with the mini DSP ears. I understand why they did. I think it was actually helpful to use at times, but I also get why people want to compare graphs, so hence why I've done this project of updating all my measurements. What I'm seeing on screen is concerning me a little bit. I'm expecting these are going to be too V-shaped for my tastes. I'm worried about the energy around 2 kilohertz being quite high. Having said that, it's also backing off around 3K, so maybe it's going to get away with it. We've got the normal 8K-ish peak. I don't align my measurements with the 8K peak. That's a separate whole conversation. Happy to have it. Let me know in the comments if you want me to talk about that and why I don't believe that's the right approach, other than doing it for the sake of compensations and making sure that we can set up things like these comparison reference targets down here. I don't believe in actually taking measurements with 8K peaks aligned. If you don't know what that means, you don't need to worry about it. For those that do know what it means, let me know in the comments if you want me to do a video about it. So let's have a listen to these. I'm expecting not to like them, but that's why we have a listen, because sometimes things surprise us. What I'm hoping here is that the base curve, this where it sort of picks up above my target from 300 Hertz onwards, that might help to offset what we see at the top, because I've said this before in other reviews, you can't take, I don't think, you can take a measurement and talk only about the treble without considering the bass, because our perception of the music is an entire frequency range. It's not just this or that. So extreme peaks, of course, will still matter, but if they're offset by the right balance points in the tuning, things can actually sound fantastic, even though you might have a peak somewhere that you don't necessarily like the look of. So that's why we have a listen. Let's do it now. And yes, that is why we listen. These are beautiful, really, really nice. They definitely have that sort of V-shaped sound. They definitely have a little bit of extra treble that I don't personally need, but they're also the best of the bunch so far. And I'm not just saying that because they're more expensive. These to me, and case in point, the Simgots are less expensive than the Aria 2, but I think the Simgots are better. Dark Phoenix is really, really lovely. I was listening to Witness Me by Jacob Collier, and the sound from them is just beautiful. Because of this bass they've got here, it fills everything out, and as I kind of suggested as I went into it, I was hoping that it would offset the top end, and it mostly does. They do have a little bit of treble that I would rather kind of pull back a tiny bit, and indeed I would probably want to run them with something like the Final Audio E-type tips just to help tame that treble a tiny bit. But beyond that, I think they're fantastic. Tonally, they're much more natural because you've got this extra weight down low. Somehow they're managing to overcome what's actually a really extreme scoop through the mid-range and the upper sort of, no, this is probably true mid-range really. And then upper mid starts to come in around here in the way I think about it anyway. But this big scoop in sort of the mids and upper mids should in theory be causing some problems, and it just sounds lovely. I might go back and have another listen just across a few more tracks in case I've landed on a couple of perfect tracks. So I had the Jamie Faulkner track I started with, and then I went to the Jacob Collier track. It's from Jesse Volume 4, their album name. I'm going to try a couple more tracks just in case a female vocal or something brings these undone with this scoop out. I think that's important. And then I'll talk to you a little bit as well about staging, which so far seems excellent. So imaging and staging, really good. A little bit of depth, nice sense of space and scale. Very, very impressed so far. So I just had a few more tracks. A couple of them were from a band called Turquoise. Some of you might know it. It's Turkuaz. They're a kind of a funk band. The reason I quite liked the fact that they came on was it's a full range instrumental band with both male and female vocals, so I heard the full range of frequencies and everything sounded great. There's definitely a little bit of emphasis in the top end, so you do find that occasionally you'll notice some treble emphasis from the Dark Phoenix, but it's done really beautifully, very tasteful, very well balanced, and the bass is just absolutely brilliant. So I'm really impressed for what was the price? 147 was it? for 147 US dollars, I'll just make sure we're still in US dollars, yeah, these are really, really excellent. I'm incredibly impressed. The specifications on them, 103 decibel sensitivity and 32 ohms, so nothing unusual out of the ordinary. I think they're really, really fantastic. Again, talking about the treble, I would probably lean towards putting a copper cable on them if you're someone that's got a copper cable already. I'm not suggesting you should go out and spend an extra however much on a cable for $140 IEM, but if you happen to have 2-pin cables, you pick up this IEM and you've got a quality copper cable, maybe give it a try, because that could help just tame that energy they've got at the top end, but not because they need it. They already sound fantastic. The tuning's beautiful, very tastefully managed. Staging is excellent on these, as I said, just sort of leading into that last listening session. Good sense of width, nice central image, and a good sense of space around it. They're not throwing a vast cavernous soundstage, but for an IEM, I think they're excellent, particularly at this price point. So they're a warm, no, they're not warm, they're a V-shaped tuning. They've got prominent bass, prominent treble, but it's all very well controlled, very well refined, and the good thing is they're not sucking out the mid-range too much. In fact, I didn't feel like it was sucking out the mid-range at all, other than possibly giving you a bit of extra sense of space between you and the vocalist, and I think that's great. So they are brilliant. I'm a big, big fan of those. Definitely my favourite so far. And as I said, coming into this, it's not about price, it's about the sound performance. Well, let's move now to another collaboration IEM, which I haven't listened to at all yet. This is my first time even looking at them, and that's the Kiwis and Crinacle collaboration on the Singolo. This one was sent out to me by, I think, by Linsol, and is a 79 US dollars. So we're kind of back in the realm of the Aria 2 and the EA500. If we have a look, let's just have a quick look at specs. Kiwi is acoustic resonance system, whatever that means. They're using a liquid crystal polymer diaphragm. We've seen those before. They can sound quite good. Crinacle's had some say in the tuning. And specifications, we've got 108 decibels per milliwatt sensitivity, 32 ohms. So all of these are sitting in about the same realm in terms of sensitivity. Now, I already know for a fact that my target and Crinacle's target are quite different, and that doesn't mean that one of us is right or wrong. Whoops, wrong button. It just means that we have different tastes. By the way, sorry, just got distracted for a second. I will be renaming the Kinera in here, so it will become the Kinera Celest Dark Phoenix. So if you do come in here looking for those measurements, look for the Dark Phoenix. But now, moving on to the Singolo, I just want to show you for a second, if this is my target curve on the screen here now, if I then have a look, I'll show you two different Crinacle target curves. So that's Crinacle, that's Crinacle's target curve there, which, as you can see, he doesn't like anywhere near as much bass as I do. And also he likes a bit more energy, particularly at the 3K peak there. I tend to like, from what I've tried, I like the peak to happen after 2K and start to maybe decline again by 3K. I'm still very much working on that part of the target curve though. For those of you seeing this and thinking this is a ridiculously extreme range, there is a massive range of preference when it comes to bass. It all comes back again to our ear canals and the natural resonance it creates. And so it's not unusual for some people to love as much bass as I do, and for that to sound neutral to them. For others, it's going to sound bloated and boomy, and it's something that you kind of have to get a sense of where your preferences are based on your anatomy, your ear canal anatomy. So knowing that we do have quite different tastes, particularly in terms of bass, it's going to be interesting to see. And in fact, let's have a look now and see what the Singolo looks like. Aha, interesting. So the Singolo is actually matching my target curve really nicely. And what I mean by that is I'm therefore expecting to like it. I'm surprised it's got as much bass as it does, given Crinacle's preferences there, but obviously part of this is him not necessarily tuning it, or not that he's tuned it, him providing advice and guidance may involve not necessarily tuning it specifically to his preference curve so much as what he knows is going to be popular. And also obviously Kiwis will have their own involvement in the tuning of this one. I should mention that the packaging here and what you're getting with it's pretty basic. There doesn't seem to be a case. I don't think I've taken a case out. I wonder if this has got slightly cheaper packaging to allow for a lower price and better performance. So no case with these. If that matters to you, you'll need to get your own case. By the way, I'm just looking at the housing here. There's some interesting stuff. I'll hold this up and see if you can see it there. There's like little grooves on the inside of the shell that seem to be that seems to be a sound tube that's actually vented out of the shell. There is a little hole at the end of it. So I'm guessing that's about the resonance system, the Kiwi's acoustic resonance system, I think it was called, CARS. That seems to be what's going on there, is it's actually using an extended port system. It's almost like a transmission line and a speaker by the look of it. So that's kind of interesting. I'm going to be curious to see what that does. It might be how they're getting the bass performance out of the driver. I don't think it talked about it or showed us pictures of it. You can see here, see that little bit on the image there? You can just sort of see that there was a bit of a groove cut out of it. I'm not sure if it's going to show us on here. Yeah, you can see it in that image there, what I'm talking about. So that's going to be some sort of system to control the airflow, which is very unique and interesting. I've not seen that before. So let's try it and see what happens. There's a brilliant, really, really impressive. And that, whether it is that or not, I can't say for sure, but I think that acoustic resonance system is really working. The bass from them is absolutely brilliant. It's impactful, it's solid, but it's not too much. It's really well controlled, very impressive. One of the tracks I was listening to there was Heart and Soul No. 9 by Turquoise. I went back to one of the tracks I had before with the Dark Phoenix, and just thoroughly enjoyable. There's nothing at all about the Singolo that I would have an issue with. It's probably erring towards a tiny bit too much in this top end here near 4K. 4K being where a lot of the sibilant sounds do sit, and so it is just getting very, very close to kind of not becoming sibilant, but for my ears, it's starting to draw my attention to it a little bit, but very, very enjoyable and not a reason for me to complain about them at all. I'm really impressed with those. I think they're absolutely fantastic. And if you're in the market for IEMs and you're not sure what to get, if you want a sound that's punchy but detailed and clear, these are absolutely brilliant. At $79, I think it was, they're very, very impressive, and I wouldn't care about not getting a case because they sound so good. What I'm interested to know is, I've really enjoyed the last two, and this is pure coincidence that it's the last two. The Singolo I think is absolutely brilliant. The Dark Phoenix is also absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to just do one last little shootout between these two and see if I think it's actually worth spending as much as the Dark Phoenix requires, or if you should just go with the Singolo because they are very impressive. So I'm going to do a couple of tracks. I'm going to come back here and give you my final wrap up, and we'll close things off in just a second. I just listened to a number of tracks, but one of them was Feeling Like a Plant, which is by Dominique Fils-Aimé, and they're both brilliant IEMs. I think tonally, the Singolo is actually more accurate to like true to life. It's more natural sounding. However, there are definitely reasons to spend a bit more money and get something like the Dark Phoenix, because it's got a level of nuance and texture and detail that I couldn't get from the Singolo. What I probably would say is that it connected me to the performance in a way that was more transparent. I felt like I was hearing more from the musician, and therefore comparing the two, it was more like I was there with the musician singing at the time. But both are absolutely fantastic. Very hard to go wrong with either. If you want a more neutral, true to life sound, I definitely think the Singolo is the choice. If you want something that's a little bit more detailed, more textured, a little bit more sense of air in the sound, that's where I think the Dark Phoenix comes in, and just a little bit more nuance that comes with it. So resolution, detail, insight into the music, the Dark Phoenix comes in better there as well. So both absolutely brilliant IEMs. I think to summarize everything, just to quickly give you a recap, the Forteza for me is okay. I don't think it's one that I'd suggest people rush out and buy. At the price of $59 US, it's not a bad price, but I think knowing that you can spend $79 and pick yourself up the Singolo, that's just a flat out no-brainer to me. Unless you like a brighter sound signature, the Singolo is the one to go for. The Aria 2 I think is better probably than the Forteza, but I don't think it's brilliant. I think it's okay. It's a slightly bright tuning. I love the Aria Snow, but in the comparisons and the competition we've got here today, I would definitely choose the slightly, I thought it was cheaper. Is it more expensive? Or same price? I would choose the same priced EA500 LM. That sounds really nice to me. Beautiful articulation and attack. For me, the Forteza and the Aria 2 were probably the weakest in terms of staging. Once you start getting to something like the EA500, it starts to open up the staging a little bit.
And then, as we've already said, the standouts for me, and by the way, therefore I wouldn't buy the EA500, I would just go straight to Singolo. Whoops, wrong one. Singolo. That was the standout for me if you want to stay under $100 at 79 bucks. It's absolutely brilliant. But if you've got more money and you do want that more insightful, kind of getting you right into the mix and the music and hearing the details and the nuance, that's where I think the Dark Phoenix is really impressive. So a bit of a mixed bag here. As I said, I went way beyond the budget I intended to here because I didn't realize that I had the Dark Phoenix. I thought I had the Phoenix Call, so that did push us a bit high. Hopefully it's still been interesting for you. Again, if you're not familiar or haven't tried it yet, you can go to pfs.squig.link and check out all these measurements for yourself, play around with all the different targets and reviewer targets and neutral targets and preference targets that are all down here. All those are available for you to play with to your heart's content. And obviously, let me know in the comments if you've got any thoughts based on using this, hearing my review, trying these IEMs for yourself. Any and all feedback about these IEMs and your experiences with them is going to help other people trying to make up their own mind. So thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this approach to an IEM review. It was a little bit different, but I really wanted to get through all these as quick as I could. And so if you did enjoy it, please hit the like button and subscribe and ring the notification bell if you haven't already. But as always, for now, I'm going to leave it to the music. So happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.